were just coming in from dihybrid crosses, where we took two organisms with two different characters, each with two traits to lead to a total of four traits crossing to each other. And we were able to predict what the offspring would look like. Now we're going to move into really just interpreting family trees, because Mendel's great. You can predict what's going to happen, but you can also use data from what's already happened to figure out what the dominant recessive relationship is between the different alleles. So we're going to read a pedigree. A pedigree is just like a family tree. You can do this for humans too. You can use it with your own family. You look at the family tree and you look for specific family tree dealing with a specific trait, and you look for patterns. It gives you a good idea of what way the alleles may be inherited. So, broadly speaking, and this will come up in the next lecture a bit, you've got squares and circles. Squares are male, circles are female. If it is filled in completely, it means that they are affected. It doesn't mean it's dominant or recessive. We're trying to figure that out. What it means is they have the condition. And if it's open, if it's white on the inside, it means that they do not have the condition. So we're going to look at some pedigrees and try and figure out what is the dominant recessive relationship to these alleles. Are they autosomal dominant condition, or is it an autosomal recessive condition? So first off, here is a pedigree. This could be what you get. It would be something like, I don't know, somebody's parents and their grandparents and their great-grandparents. You've got all of the information about everybody in the family, and you know that 3 of the individuals in this family are afflicted with some sort of genetic condition, some sort of trait. So let's try and figure out if this is autosomal dominant or autosomal recessive. The first thing I do is I will assume a dominant pattern. So I assume that big A is affected, little a is normal. That is, if you have the dominant allele, you have the condition. That means that that person up top, the great-grandmother, has a dominant allele. We are just making the assumption. If she has it, the guy she mates with, that square over there, he doesn't have the condition. The only way he cannot have the condition is if he is fully autosomal recessive, 2 little a's. Because if he had any big A, he would have the condition. All right, so they have a bunch of kids. And we look at the kids, and we know this boy, their son, off to the far left, he also does not have the condition. That means he does not have an affected allele. Is it possible for that to occur? Yes. He gets 1 little a from dad, and the mom, apparently, the great-grandmother, must have a little a allele. So therefore, that's possible. It's possible in his sister, and it's possible in his brother. This last brother mates with somebody who's completely normal. So they also must have that recessive condition. They have 2 kids who are normal. The kids marry somebody who's normal. But then, in that 3rd generation down, you start to see a mating event. You have little a cross to little a, 2 normal, and they produce children who have the condition. Is that possible? Well, this boy in that F3 generation, he has a dominant allele. Where did he get it? It didn't come from either of his parents. It's impossible, unless there was a mutation. But then you got another normal and then another affected, and to have those 2 mutations would be quite rare. So it's very likely that this is not an autosomal dominant condition, because those offspring at the very bottom are impossible to have. If we follow this dominant pattern. All right, let's change our assumption then. Let's assume it's a recessive pattern. If that's the case, little a is affected, and big A, anybody with a big A is normal. So we know great-grandmother up there in the P generation, totally affected. She must have a little a and a little a. She mates with somebody who's got a big A, but we don't know what else he has. All we know is he has a big A, because this could be a recessive condition. All right, they have a bunch of kids. Each of their kids gets a big A from dad and a little a from mom. So they are recessive for that condition. They're carrying it, but they are not showing it. They mate somebody who's normal. We don't know what their alleles are. We just know they're normal. All right, they have 2 kids. Their 2 kids definitely have a big A. We know that for sure. But we don't know if they have a little a or not, because they could have gotten either one from mom. I'm sorry, from dad. So that next generation, they all have big A's, but we don't know what else they might have. We can't tell just by looking at them. Oh, but wait. The F3 generation is displaying this recessive trait. That means that that boy off to the left has to have 2 little a's. Is that possible? Well, if you look back up, it turns out it is. These 2 parents in the F2 generation could have a little a. It's possible. And because of that, it means that it is possible this is an autosomal recessive condition. It's logically coherent, whereas the autosomal dominant condition was not. So this is a possibility. It doesn't mean that it is true. It just means that it is possible. Let's do another. We're going to assume a dominant pattern for this next one. Starting off, we look at if for a dominant pattern, big A is affected, little a is normal. So we've got this mom up here. She has to have a big A, but we don't know what else she has. The dad has to have a big A because he too is affected. We don't know what else he has. The first daughter there has to have a big A. We don't know what else she has, but we know that that son must have a little a, little a. Is it possible? Well, we could this could be possible if the parents each had a little a as well. And because we don't know what they have based on their phenotype, it is possible that they have a little a in each, that they are heterozygous and could have had a completely normal offspring. So an autosomal dominance pattern is logically consistent. Let's go on to look at this as if it was an autosomal recessive pattern. If it's autosomal recessive, that means that little a is going to be affected. That the only way the parents can have this condition is if they have 2 little a alleles. They're homozygous recessive. Same with that first daughter. The son, though, is going to suddenly have a dominant allele. Is this possible? Could he have gotten this dominant allele from either parent? And the answer is no, unless he is a mutation. So that means that an autosomal recessive pattern is not logically consistent. We can cross it off. The only way this particular pattern works so far that we know of is as a autosomal dominant condition. And then our third pedigree. Everything's affected here. This is an entirely affected family. Well, assuming a dominant pattern, we know that each parent has to have a dominant allele, and that means they could pass that dominant allele on to their offspring. It is possible that this pedigree is autosomal dominant. Looking at it from a recessive perspective, if it was recessive, it means that the affected individuals have little a, little a. Each parent has 2 little a alleles. Is it possible for each of them to pass the little a to their offspring? Of course it is. So in this particular pedigree, we don't have any information to say it is dominant or recessive. It could be either. It doesn't have to be either. This doesn't give us much good information. We can't exclude anything. Everything is logically possible with this third pedigree. So we can use pedigrees in order to figure out about Mendelian traits. We can use them to figure out is something dominant? Is it recessive? Is it autosomal? Is it sex-linked? We didn't do sex-linked ones, but is it? We can use family trees to figure out what is the possible inheritance pattern of this allele. In the pedigree analysis, and then going forward for future lectures, squares represent males, circles represent females. Filled in represents affected, open represents unaffected. And then, as we'll see in the next lecture, a single dot in the center typically represents a carrier who's heterozygous. These are the content review questions meant to focus your studies. In the next mini lecture, we're going to go over some traits that are Mendelian, but they do not follow the same simple dominant recessive patterns. We're going to talk about gene linkage, sex-linked or X-linked genes, incomplete dominance, codominance, multiple allelic inheritance. So that's coming up in the next mini lecture.